Welcome to Shadowed Tales Archive. Tonight, we invite you to descend into darkness with a chilling anthology of horror stories, each one inspired by true events. This is episode 22. Let the nightmare begin. The Nights of Elara. A pinching feeling of dread washes over me as my eyes sweep across this room. Soft, low lights etch out details of a crew of sweet stuffed animals entrusted with the task of keeping watch over me as I sleep. The purity and nostalgia they represent are to serve as comfort so that I can drift away into slumber and nary a care. My gaze then shifts beyond my bed and toward my bedroom door that is open wide, inviting the lamplight from the living room as well. I have done all that I know how to incorporate as much soothing light to illuminate the very dark corners that could harbor secrets in this heavy, black night air. If I bring everything that could be hidden to the light, then there will be no occasion for surprise, and I will surely be safe. And I know this to be true. I know I am safe, that nothing I fear is reality. There isn't such hogwash as the bogeyman, and truly young adults should no longer fear such ridiculous fables. The things that go bump in the night are nothing more than a collection of what children fear the most. I'm not a child. By that logic, I'm showing myself to be, so very pathetic. I pay rent here. I own this room. I didn't invite anyone else to stay the night. Therefore, I know that I am alone. I am safe. I am safe, and now I choose to close my eyes and go to sleep. When I wake up, I shall roll out of bed and carry out a brand new day whilst feeling the sting of quiet humiliation as sunlight replaces the need for night lights and outshines the wimpy light that these 60-watt bulbs give off. Just as last night and the night before. But all I am doing this to keep her away from me always. And I have done all I can do. So by the time I am done saying good night to each member of my plush army, I will be sound asleep. My eyelids flutter open and my chest dips as if it had caved in. I cannot inhale as easily as I could upon achieving slumber. My mind fumbles groggily, spinning out of urgency, out of panic. Get up. I try to whisper. I hope to rouse myself into action, calming myself and settling into a new position, for I am sure that I'm simply recovering from a nightmare. But my body continues to lie still, and my voice lurks trapped still within my throat. Get up. I attempt to plea. I cannot turn my head. My shoulders are pinned heavily to this mattress. I am wide awake. My heart quickens itself, readying to flee in search of safety. I can see my bedroom door, still open. The door has not moved at all, and nothing has been touched. I know the effort to be futile, so I attempt to shut my eyes and wait for this nightmare to pass. Because that's what is happening. It's just my mind playing tricks and nothing more than that. I shut my eyes in search of calm and rest. But alas, they cannot be found. I cannot breathe. My heart is rallying against its confinement in this ribcage. I am certain that my chest wall may explode from all the pressure. I can feel the weight bear down further and further still, mocking me. She rests gleefully in her folklore, but I am very familiar with her presence. The hag comes to visit at the worst of times, an unwelcome acquaintance sharing my bed and stealing precious moments where I could be sleeping if I weren't fighting for control of my mind while silently begging for freedom to move about on my own free will. I desperately attempt to move the right side of my hip or force my right shoulder to rise as the weight intensifies. I blink as hot tears of agony stream steadily down the corners of my eyes. Shadows dance in the corners, a taunting marionette where the light cannot tread. I hear steady breathing against my own shallow gasps. I become dizzy and the room begins to twirl. Did my sheets just hiss? My body is frozen, stiff, and it is no longer mine. The hag has settled in to pay me a visit again. This sickening void of terror and isolation is the gift that she comes bearing, for no one will ever be able to grasp what I am going through. Most people cannot, and will not ever believe that something so strange can ever truly happen. The back of my skull digs further into the pillow, and my neck constricts so that my belabored breathing becomes even more difficult. I try desperately to let out even just one sound. A single sound can then lead the way for the smallest of movement. If one or the other can be achieved, then I can free myself from the spell, and I can then return to safety. The clock records when an onlooker would judge only to be a young woman fast asleep in her bed. The rhythm taps out the minutes that slide away from me as nothing happens. Nothing has eyes all on me, as the hag lets her chin rest atop mine, like a jilted lover who has come to visit in the shadows the night affords. We share the same breath, nose touching mine, eyes preying upon my deepest thoughts and ripping my soul to shreds. These tears are an offering unto her. Soon, if I am lucky, the salty liquid will dampen my hair and loose the bond that my head has entered packed with my bedsheets. Upholding an agreement that the rest of me did not ever recall striking. The hag shakily cups her hands gently behind my neck, slithers upward, taking gentle hold of my head. Her hands offer no comfort that human contact would give. There is no reassurance in this all-consuming grasp. These familiar eyes, gazing into my own, are a most hideous sight, as a child of nothing cannot contain a soul. All warmth is gone as I peer into those blackened and vacant orbs, the birthplace of my nightmares. My body begins to fall completely numb, and a crooked, unnatural, otherworldly grin spreads deliberately across the hag's face just as all other times before. If I only understood what she wanted, I would give her absolutely anything if it meant she would never come and visit me again. She curls her feet underneath her pelvis, pushing down on my stomach and causing my diaphragm to constrict. All hope fades away. Those listless, ravenous eyes recognize something in mine, something they desperately long for. Her pitted and rotting cheeks moving closer to mine. My nose fills with the stench of musty earth and decaying flesh. Head tilting and neck cracking in twisting and jerking motions. Lacking the fluidity of those of the land of the living, she attempts, my deepest horrors realized right then, to hold on to me in search of what she so greedily seeks. One simple kiss, solidifying my exit from this life, and sinking instead to the oddly tempting promise of nothing. One simple night in which nothing can belong with someone. Frenetically, I keep demanding, over and over, on my right shoulder to buck her off of my torso, push her away, break her captivating embrace, her hypnotizing, awful intent. Such inhuman strength, an eerily tantalizing thought of just giving up and agreeing to stay, because why keep fighting, could suggest that I will never be free so long as this oppressive darkness ensues. But this has happened in times past, and I know if I just want it badly enough, I can end what is sure to happen. Suddenly space and time rip apart from each other. Flashes of light strike and fill my vision, and the powerful force behind it quakes, consuming my entire body. The shriek that had been held back for now several hours finally releases itself. All that exists is that silent scream, now given its brief chance to speak. The only thing that can be heard is weak and shrill, but it is just enough to bring me back from the throne room to nowhere and slam me back into my own bed. My right shoulder moves ever so slightly from its position, and I escape from under this weight. The hag will not have me tonight. 4:37 a.m. and I am free. I shudder as I wail. These nights occur often and without mercy. I cast a glance at my little army of teddy bears and other stuffed animals. I lean against them as my eyes continue relentlessly leaking. My body is racked with sobs as I know there exists not a single person who can help me. There is not a person, pill, or potion in this world who can make all of the nights filled with fear of never returning from nowhere end. All who can know of the confusion, terror, and wonder of what happens is no one at all. whispers within. I had never been frightened by anything. Sure, I've always been fearful of things like terrorism, bankruptcy, drunk drivers, but nothing paranormal. Ghosts, goblins, ghouls, and the like. Not out of any misdirected bravery, but simply because of the fact that I didn't believe they existed. How can one be afraid of something imaginary? Then I found out how wrong I had been. How very, very wrong. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Allow me to set the scene. My family and I had recently moved to Indianapolis. We left our home of 6 years in Texas, the home where we had raised our 2 children, because of a new job opportunity. It was my job that had been the reason for moving from Ohio to Texas in the first place. But after 6 years, we came to the conclusion that we were Yankees through and through. We just weren't suited to live in the desert of southwestern Texas. Arriving in Indiana, we opted to rent a house temporarily. That would give us the time to complete the sale of our house in Texas and look around for a new home that our family would like, a forever home. My office was located in downtown Indianapolis, and there was a newly gentrified section of the city located within 5 miles. We found an old house, very old, that the owner had restored with the help of subsidies from the city council. That's what he told us over the phone, anyway. The first time that we arrived to meet the owner and look around, we were impressed. We had beat into the house, so my wife Megan and I parked in the long gravel drive and exited our vehicle, our 2 young children Eli and Noah in tow. We walked around the house in awe. It, like the neighboring homes, was practically a mansion. The entire avenue consisted of large, brick homes with slate roofs and scores of chimneys. Lots of limestone lintels and decorative filigrees, even a gargoyle here and there. None on the home we were looking at, unfortunately. As promised, the house was pristine. From the outside, the landlord's name was Frank. He was a pretty cool guy, a bit cynical, but given the people he probably had to deal with on a daily basis, not too bad. He seemed to take to our children pretty well and didn't mind that we had a large dog. He pointed out some of the outdoor renovations, repointing of the brick, new slate roof, and newly glazed windows. Then we went around back to enter through one of the rear doors. When he swung open the door, it quickly became obvious that the exterior of the house was not indicative of the interior. Its beauty was indeed only skin deep. A musty odor wafted through the entryway, and the interior hall was dimly lit. All of the sheer curtains had been drawn, and only slivers of sunlight filtered through, motes of dust floating about. By the end of our tour, we had determined that the house was definitely in need of a lot of work, but it had a certain charm about it. The rear entry hall was surfaced with a vintage hex-pattern porcelain tile, which extended into a small, very small, half bath immediately inside the entryway. At 6'4", I couldn't stand fully upright in the washroom. The hallway extended forward toward the front doors, and at some point about halfway, the flooring transitioned to hardwood. As the foyer opened up to the full 3-story height of the house, we noticed a huge stained glass chandelier hanging from the ceiling. It was impressive. Just to the left, a small, and when I say small, I mean normal-sized, as the rest of the doorways in the house were almost 9 feet in height, swinging door led into a tiny kitchen. The kitchen had absolutely no conveniences save for a sink. It was almost a surprise that there was running water. When we pointed out that our refrigerator would obviously not fit, Frank offered to bring in a smaller one from another of his rentals. The kitchen had 3 more doors, one leading into a dining room, one leading out into the backyard, and one leading down into the cellar. The cellar was a sight. The stairwell was steep, just one flight leading down about 20 feet to the cellar floor. Bare bulbs lit each of the 8 rooms it had been divided into. This basement was one of the creepiest places in the house, complete with dripping pipes, chains hanging from the block walls for no apparent reason, and a huge gravity furnace in the farthest room from the stairs. It lurked there like a colossal monster with a multitude of steel arms reaching up into the house above. The floor back there was littered with papers and boxes, and the walls were lined with cabinets that we never did dare to open. Aside from the kitchen and half bath, The first floor of the home contained a dining room and large living area, both separated from the main hall by pairs of huge arched doorways, and both with large limestone hearths set into the far walls. I suppose that the gravity furnace was either a newer addition or that, like most that I have had experience with, did not do an adequate job of heating a large house. The bedrooms occupied the second and third floors. A niche in the wall housed an old-fashioned servant bell system, bells on springs attached to chains leading to each of the upstairs rooms. Frank claimed that they still worked, and we were sure that the kids would test them out. The upstairs bedrooms were unremarkable, save for the supersized doorways and fireplaces in all of them. The 2 bathrooms on each floor were also tiled in the hex-pattern porcelain we had seen in the entryway and had genuine, honest-to-God claw-footed bathtubs. Frank made sure to point out another unique feature of the house. At the back of each bedroom closet lay a narrow, almost undetectable doorway. He opened one of them to show us a system of slim passages that ran behind the lathe and plaster walls and connected most of the bedrooms to each other. Why were they there? Probably for no other reason than one would expect to find something like them in a house like that. So, as I mentioned earlier, the house was perfectly creepy in every way. We'll take it. I figured that if I would ever experience anything spine-chilling or uncanny in any way in my lifetime, it would happen in that house. I wasn't disappointed. It was late fall, and the apple tree in the backyard had started shedding its fruit. There were half-rotting apples all over the lawn, so I was raking them up and scooping them in a bag for the trash. I stopped to rest for a moment, and my eyes fell to rest on the garage. Like the house, it was brick with a slate roof. It had 2 large carriage house type doors. Since the drive was large enough and there was a turnaround at the rear of the house, we generally left our vehicles outside. The only time that we had even been inside the garage was when we had moved in. We had instructed the movers to store some things out there, things that we would not be needing for a while until we found our forever home. Suddenly, I had an overwhelming urge to give the garage a closer inspection. About 40 feet to a side, it, like everything else about the property, was a rather large structure. There were no doors other than the carriage doors, so I eased open one leaf just wide enough to step inside. I felt around, and my fingers eventually brushed up against a chain hanging from the ceiling rafters. I yanked, and a single bare bulb cast a small pool of light around me. I made my way through the garage, pulling more chains, and managed to illuminate most of the garage floor. All of our belongings, garden tools, lawnmower, my large shop tools, and boxes of things that we hadn't planned to use for a while, lay against a wall along one edge of the floor. The only other thing in the garage was a 4-foot-high pile of slate shingles in a back corner. I walked over and took one of the tiles in my hands. Heavy. The garage roof alone probably held tons of weight. I couldn't imagine roofing the entire house in slate. I heard a ticking, scratching sound from overhead. The ceiling of the garage was mostly open, with bare rafters through which you could see the underside of the roof sheathing. About 1/4 of the rafters had been covered over with wooden planks, forming a sort of floor, probably for extra storage space. I imagined that a house and garage as old as this had been must-have mice, at the very least. From the intensity of the sound, though, I could tell that it was something much bigger than a mouse, even bigger than a rat. I groaned at the prospect of having to evict a raccoon or some larger animal from the attic. I considered leaving it alone. We were just temporary visitors anyway. It was probably a more permanent resident than us. My conscience ruled against that thought. With 2 children who were bound to end up playing out in the garage someday, I couldn't chance them encountering a wild, possibly rabid animal. I peered up into the darkness, allowing my eyes to adjust, looking for some sign of movement. There! I saw it. Quick. Fleeting. It startled me so that I dropped the slate tile I had been holding, and it shattered at my feet. I had only caught a short glimpse in my peripheral vision, but it didn't look like any animal I had ever seen before. An icy chill ran down my spine, but I chalked it up to the darkness, an unfamiliar place, and a general feeling of anxiety. We had recently completed our move, and moving had always stressed me out. I used a shovel to scoop up the tile shards and took them around the back of the garage, throwing them into a pile of stones and bricks that a previous tenant had heaped back there. Then I went back into the garage, turned out the lights, and closed up the door. Later that evening, after dinner, after the kids were asleep, my wife Megan and I sat in the living room, huddled close to a fire that I had built in the hearth. We had learned that the old house got extremely cold at night, despite running the furnace at full tilt. "Hey, hun, I think we might have an animal problem out in the garage." Megan looked up in surprise. "Rats? No. Probably a raccoon or something. I really only got a glimpse of it, but it seemed pretty big. What are we going to do?" "The boys. What if it's rabbit?" She looked alarmed. "I'll call an exterminator tomorrow. I'm not going to mess with it. Who knows what might be out there? I'm a lover, not a fighter." Megan smiled, and I felt more at ease. I had decided to put the problem in someone else's capable hands. Whatever was out there, it would soon be gone. We began to talk about how relieved we were that the move was over. The conversation turned to our next step, finding a forever home, and then led to talk of making the creepy house more livable until such time as we could move out. Painting, maybe? Replacing the carpet runner on the staircase. Definitely. Just then, one of the bells in the niche jingled. I got up and walked over to the front hall. The bell jingled again, and I could see that it was the one labeled master bedroom. I yelled up the staircase, "Boys, get back to bed and stay out of mommy and daddy's room." No answer, but the bell was silent. I assumed that they got the message. When we climbed the staircase a half hour later, we looked in and saw that both boys were tucked in and sawing logs. I imagined that they were excited, but I didn't want them exploring the house until I could check it out thoroughly. If there was a raccoon or something in the garage, there just may have been mice, rats, or worse in the house. I started a fire in the smaller fireplace in the master bedroom, and we fell asleep as it waned. I was in a sort of twilight when I heard the bell jingle again. "What the?" I crossed our bedroom and tiptoed down the stairs to the second floor. Looking in their rooms, I discovered that both boys were still tucked in. Jingling again. Now I ran down to the first floor hall, just in time to see the master bedroom bell shake again. Bewildered, I headed back upstairs. "You rang?" I asked Megan as I walked back into our room. "What? Why did you pull the bell chain? Are you trying to freak me out? Or did you just miss me?" She looked puzzled. I didn't pull the chain." I could tell that she was telling the truth. I had gotten good at reading her over the 10 years of our marriage. With irritation and perhaps a bit of denial, I resolved that we did, in fact, have a rodent problem in the house. That was the only explanation, right? I picture a mouse, or worse, scampering across the bell chain as it ran behind the walls through one of the house's heating ducts or pipe chases. Frank would certainly be getting an angry call in the morning. We eventually managed to fall asleep, even though we could hear one or another of the bells ring a few more times during the night. Frank grumbled a bit about no damn mice, but he did agree to have someone come out and check. He knew a guy. Frank knew a guy for just about everything: plumbing, yard work, and now pest control. The exterminator set and baited a cage trap for the raccoon out in the garage. After checking out the basement and closets, he said that although he didn't find any signs of mice or rats, scat, nests, etc., he would set some glue traps under our furniture and near the baseboards. He said that they would be safer than snap traps, which we probably didn't want around the kids. Both Megan and I thought of the suffering that a mouse would endure if it were caught in the glue to eventually starve to death or die of thirst. So we asked for an alternative. The Terminator, as Eli and Noah called him, agreed to set some bait stations instead. He said that Frank wouldn't be happy about the extra cost, but I could see that he was pleased to be upping his sale. He said that the bait stations just held poison, out of reach of children and pets, which the pests would eat and then leave. They would bleed out somewhere within a couple of days. He promised that we would never have to see or smell the dead mice, or whatever they were. Still sounded pretty nasty, but at least we could just leave them and forget about it. Out of sight, out of mind. We gave it about a week or so, but nothing ever showed up in the cage trap outside, and the bells still jingled all night. Sometimes in our room, other times in the boys', yet other times in the unoccupied rooms. I called the Terminator again, and he said that Frank had instructed him to just put out the damn glue traps, which he did. He also rearmed the trap in the garage with what he called special bait and warned us to stay away from it. Another few days passed with no changes. I checked hourly at first, then daily, but nothing appeared in the traps. I was determined to get rid of the varmints myself. So I got on the internet and began looking up homemade solutions. I found a really simple one that involved rubber banding some paper over a 5-gallon bucket and cutting a cross in the top. I set the bait, a peanut butter and cheese cracker, carefully near the center of the cross and pushed it to the back of our master bedroom closet. The concept was that when the rodent went for the bait, he would fall through the paper and get stuck in the bucket. Sounded slow, catching them one at a time like that, but at least it would be making some progress. Nothing happened the first night. The bells still jingled. Midway through the following evening, though, I was startled awake by the sound of something falling into the bucket. Something big. Oh God, it must have been a rat. I jumped out of bed, still in my boxers and bare feet, and whipped open the closet door. Now I've got you, you little foo. I'll never forget what I saw. Thinking back, I still get a chill running down my spine. Tiny hands gripped the lip of the bucket, and it pulled itself up over the rim. It was not a mouse. It was not a rat. It was not a raccoon. When it had fully extracted itself from a pail, I could see that it stood about a foot high when erect. It was humanoid in form. Humanoid, but definitely not human. Pale skin hanging over a bony frame. Although it was naked, I could see no genitalia to speak of, yet I got the feeling that it was a he. Huge eyes that were black through and through, no irises. Its ears and nose were simply holes in its head. It had no hair, and when it turned toward me, it flashed a big, toothy smile. Crazy, they looked like human teeth, not enlarged canines or front teeth, as one would expect a rodent or small animal to have. For some reason that made it seem even more disturbing. It waved the peanut butter cracker in one tiny hand and ran off. Ran off into the passageway between the walls, the panel snapping shut after it went through. In a cold sweat, I ran to the bedroom door and switched on lights. Holy Mother of God. Shit. Fuck me. Megan sat up, scared by my reaction. If only she had seen it. I immediately ran to the kids' rooms and switched their lights on. In fact, within the next 5 minutes, the entire house was alight. Except the cellar, though. That place gave me the creeps on a good day. The 4 of us had gathered in the living room. Still shirtless and shaking from the cold or the shock, I said, "That's it. We're not spending the night in this house. Get dressed. We'll find a hotel." "Nonsense," said Megan. "We're not going anywhere. What the hell happened?" I pulled her aside, out of earshot of the boys, and told her what I had seen. "Come on," she pleaded. "Think about this rationally. Nothing like that exists. It had to be a rat or something. It was dark. You were half asleep. I mean, seriously, honey. Once again, I wanted it to be true. Even a rat seemed like a better alternative than what I had seen. Well, I thought I had seen. I calmed down a bit. Megan got the boys back to sleep while I made a cup of tea and settled into one of the tubs for a hot bath. After a bit, I was calmed down enough to go back to bed. As I fell into sleep, a bell jingled. Every night after got progressively worse. The bells continued ringing throughout the days and night. I kept hearing bumps in the dark, panels slamming shut. At times, I heard the closet door creak open, the proverbial monster in the closet. I could even swear that a few times I saw it watching me from the darkness beyond the cracked door. The final straw was when I awoke one night, roused by a sound near my bed, and came face to face with it as it stared at me over the edge of the mattress. Once again, I jumped out of bed and flipped the lights on. "That's it, you little bastard." I couldn't see it, but I heard it scampering toward the closet. I gave chase and saw it just as it slipped through the panel at the back of the closet and into the hidden passage. Determined to put an end to the insanity, I grabbed a flashlight from my nightstand drawer. By that time, Megan was looking at me as if I was crazy, and I considered that she may have been right. I threw on a t-shirt and ducked through the panel at the back of the closet. It was the first time I had been back in those passages. Maybe, as a younger man, my curiosity would have made me check them out the first day we had moved in. But over time, the thirst for adventures like that had been quenched by a too-much-effort attitude. The passages had hardwood floors, unfinished planks widely set, not carefully like in the livable areas of the house. I saw only the backs of the walls, laths with plaster that had oozed between the seams before hardening. To my surprise, there were no cobwebs, as if someone had been using the passageways. But the floor had a layer of dust and little crumbs of plaster coating it. There were footprints in the dust, not just one set running away, not even a set coming toward the bedroom and then away. There were hundreds of footprints running this way and that. Either my little friend had buddies or he had been a busy guy. I was so fascinated that I had about forgotten why I entered the passage when I heard another bump down the hall. My flashlight only cast its beam a short distance, but I shone it ahead and slowly walked down the hall. I had to hunch over at times, as it seemed to have been built for a man smaller than myself. I suppose that people were shorter back when the house had been built. Of course, I don't imagine that the passages were built for comfort. I could see that they were built out of some necessity. I was a bit surprised to find that a set of narrow stairs led down to the second floor, another down to the first, and another that must have gone all of the way to the cellar. I was constantly propelled ahead by a series of bumping noises. Whatever he was, he clearly was not afraid of me. The noises weren't moving away from me very quickly. It was almost as if he were waiting for me to follow. As much as I wanted to avoid the cellar, I was a man on a mission. I plunged ahead until the passage at last came to an end. It wasn't closed off at the end, but apparently opened into one of the cellar's rooms. I noticed an iron flap-type door set high into the wall and realized that I must have ended up in one of the coal bins, built before the gravity furnace had been converted to burn heating oil instead of coal. Frank had assured us that the door had been permanently sealed, but now I doubted it. A dim light filled the room, moonlight filtering through the smudged and dirty glass of a high-set window, but not enough to see by. I spun slowly around, shining my flashlight ahead as I turned. I was surrounded by dozens of the little creatures. They did not appear to be afraid of me, nor did they appear to be aggressive. I felt safe, even somewhat calm, relieved to know what it was that I had been pursuing for the past weeks. Calm, that is, until one of them, the bold one that had been in my closet, I believe, spoke. In a gravelly, high-pitched voice, it raised the peanut butter cracker and questioned, "More." That was all it took to send me bolting out of the room and up the cellar stairs. I slammed the door shut behind me and threw the bolt. Pouring myself a glass of water from the kitchen tap, I walked to the living room and sat down on the couch. I was breathing heavy, almost hyperventilating. Even though I knew in the back of my mind that nothing had really changed and they apparently had the run of the house, I calmed down after a while. I never did fall back asleep that night. Not entirely. I must have nodded off occasionally, but I woke every time I heard something stir. After a fitful night, I returned to the kitchen to put on a pot of coffee once the dawn sunlight began sifting through the house's windows. I called the exterminator at precisely 8:05 a.m. I wanted to be the first to get a hold of him, but I didn't want to leave a message. I needed to talk to him immediately. I was in luck, and he promised to make our house the first stop of the day. While I waited for him to arrive, I drank some coffee. As the caffeine started to kick in, I began to understand the ridiculousness of what I thought that I had experienced during the night. I convinced myself that I had merely dozed off on the couch and had a horrible dream. Yes, that's what it had been, a dream. Nevertheless, I would have the exterminator check out the basement, as well as the rest of the traps. I met him out back as he was getting out his truck. I tried to speak lightheartedly as I related my nightmare. It all sounded so silly when I told the story out loud. He smiled a little, but didn't seem as amused as I thought he would be. Perhaps the normally jovial man was having a rough start to the day. He headed for the garage first. He opened the door, just a crack, and, turning on his flashlight, poked his head inside. Then he turned back to face me, a serious look on his face. "You had better wait here. Looks like the little buggers are back." "What is it?" I asked with excitement. "Raccoons? Rats? Oh, please tell me it's not rats." "No, not that bad." He shook his head. "You may want to stock up on peanut butter and cheese crackers, though." Whispers from the trunk. 3 years ago, I had been asked by my employers to retrieve a particular item, but that day, I walked away with more than just a mere trinket. I had been employed for several years at an antique store called A Moment in Time, and I liked my work. I got to meet many interesting people and encounter rare items of just as much interest. Often my elderly employers, a married couple known as the Hudsons, would send me out to pick up items that had been donated to the store. Sometimes the trip was just a few blocks away, and other times I had to leave the city for the outskirts. In the end, my final trip out would take me further than I had ever imagined possible. The item pickup seemed simple enough. Go to the house, pick up the trunk, and bring it back to the shop. But when I finally got to the house that day, it was anything but simple. As I drove deeper into the forest and onto the large property, the birds stopped singing, the insects stopped buzzing, and even the wind seemed to come to a halt. The house had clearly been abandoned and had been so for some time. What was once a gorgeous 2-story log cabin on the edge of the lake was now a decaying structure overgrown with wild vines and uncut weeds that blocked out the windows on the first floor. The roof was blackened by a fire and had a large gaping hole that surely allowed the elements to decimate the interior just as severely as the exterior. Moving through the thick weeds, following what was left of the front walk, I knocked on the door but received no response. I knocked again, but there was no denying that no one was in the house. I checked the faded numbers of the house's address to the information that I had been given. It was the correct house. As I put my hand on the doorknob, it fell from the rotten door and landed on the wooden porch with a loud thud. The door slowly creaked open on its own. I peeked inside and looked around and saw nothing moving. More vines snaked along the floor like a natural carpet. There was no furniture in the whole house. All that was left was a broken grandfather clock and the long dormant fireplace. I could see that the windows in the distant kitchen area were broken and dirty. There was a single bedroom that was also empty. Small circles on the dirty floor indicated that furniture had once been in the room, but removed recently, it seemed. The adjoining bathroom was a mess. The pipes were no longer dripping as rust encrusted the leaks. The medicine cabinet mirror had been broken. Checking the closets, I found nothing but a stray wire coat hanger. On the wall of the kitchen, there was a phone. I picked it up and listened to the receiver, but I heard nothing, no dial tone, no busy signal. Only silence. I hung the phone up. I called out again, but the house remained silent, except for my own footsteps against the warped wooden floorboards. The staircase itself was its own story. The vines engulfed the side of the stairs and wrapped up the banister. Most of the steps were cracked and splintered. Other steps were missing entirely. An ominous thought entered my mind. Who put the trunk up for donation? As I ascended the stairs, I couldn't help but feel like someone was watching me. My skin began to crawl with building uneasiness. The second floor was a room all its own, extending the entire width and length of the house itself. The hole in the roof shone a single intense beam of sunlight when the wide tree branches over the house would allow the light's passage. In the center of this beam of light was a single trunk. I took a step toward the trunk and heard the rapid steps of a small child running behind me. I froze and looked over my shoulder quickly, but saw nothing, and all fell silent again. I called out, but received no reply. Wanting to get the trunk and get out of that house as fast as I could, I kneeled down in front of the trunk and checked the lock, but it was secured. I wiped the sweat from my face and looked around in a feeble attempt to find some sort of tool to pry open the lock. As my eyes left the trunk, the lock began to loudly rattle. I jumped back and stared at the trunk, my heart pounding hard in my chest. With my shaking hand, I tested the lock again, and this time it was loose. I removed the lock from the trunk and took a deep breath as I slowly opened the lid. Inside the trunk, I found what looked like scraps of newspaper and a single red velvet bag. I opened the bag and pulled out a porcelain doll. I held it in my hands and studied it, the uneasy feeling returning with a vengeance. The doll itself seemed so otherworldly. It was a doll of a small girl. She was wearing black and white saddle shoes and white stockings, with a snow-white circular-brimmed hat on her head. Her dress was snow-white as well, reaching down to the doll's knees and halfway down her arms. A red sash was tied at the doll's waist with a red beret clipped in her hair. Her hair was the deepest black, blacker than charcoal. It reached down to her waist and had bangs cut just over where her eyes should have been. The doll's face was blank. No eyes, no mouth, no nose. Just a blank canvas that was even whiter than her dress. I carefully slipped the doll back into the bag and set it on the floor beside me. Slipping my hand back into the trunk, I checked it for other items, but found only more scrap newspapers. At least I thought they were scrap. I caught a glimpse of a strange picture in the scraps, and saw that it was an old article clipped from the newspaper. The article told of the mysterious fire that happened in the house, how there was no explanation ever given and the case was still being investigated. Another article spoke of mysterious animal deaths on the property. A third clip spoke of a little girl drowning. On and on, each article I picked up spoke of one tragedy after another, all happening at the house or its property. The dates stretched back as far as 70 years, and in every photo that accompanied the articles, I saw the same name of the person who was reportedly responsible for all the tragedies, Caroline, as well as the same object, the doll. I felt a chill go on my spine. I reached for the velvet bag with the doll, but my hand only found the floor. I looked down, and the bag was gone. A thump from behind caught my attention. I turned around and saw the bag in the middle of the floor. Outlined in the bag was the form of the doll sitting upright. Now my heart was beating so hard I could hear in my head. I grabbed the doll, tossed it in the trunk, slammed the lid, and dragged the entire thing down the stairs. As I dragged the trunk through the door itself somehow slammed shut on its own. It was a struggle to lift the trunk into the back of the truck, but I managed to do it thanks to the fear-induced adrenaline. The drive back to the shop seemed to take even longer than before. All the while, I kept looking in the rearview mirror at the trunk in the pickup bed. Whenever I looked away, I would hear a bizarre, scratching noise, like a tree branch dragging against the roof of a house. As soon as I pulled into the parking lot of the store, I ran in to inform my bosses of the delivery. Mrs. Hudson could see I was upset. She sat me down and asked me to tell her what happened, while Mr. Hudson went to check on the trunk. Before I could even begin my story, I heard Mr. Hudson's weak voice call for help as he hit the gravel of the parking lot. With Mrs. Hudson at my side, I knelt down next to him and checked his neck for a pulse, but I couldn't find one. He was dead. Mrs. Hudson began to panic, so I told her to run back inside and call 911 while I hopelessly attempted CPR. I looked around, tried to figure out what caused Mr. Hudson's collapse, when I noticed that the trunk had been opened. The lid was being held open by the lock that had been bent at an odd angle. On the inside of the lid of the trunk were tiny scratches, almost like claw marks, as if something or someone had been locked inside. The EMTs and police arrived at the shop, but it was too late. Mr. Hudson had died from an apparent massive heart attack. As the ambulance pulled away with Mr. Hudson's body and the police took Mrs. Hudson aside for questions, I cautiously approached the open trunk. Inside the trunk was the bag with the doll. It was again sitting upright. I opened the bag and took out the doll. Small abrasions and dirt covered the doll's small hands and fingers. They matched perfectly with the marks on the lid of the trunk. The brittle paper that had been clawed began to flake away, revealing the ancient wood beneath. Strange markings marred the wood, like a burned engraving. I cleared away the paper and saw a name. Annette. I put the doll back in the trunk and tried to slam the lid shut, but it wouldn't close anymore. Unable to cope with the loss of her husband, Mrs. Hudson closed down the shop. She died of a stroke 2 weeks later. As for Annette, the name I had given the doll, I couldn't get her out of my mind. I would dream of a faceless girl every night, and I would hear tiny footsteps running through my apartment at all hours of the day. Whenever I drove by the closed-down antique shop, I would see her standing in the window, staring with her blank eyes. I put her on eBay along with the trunk and newspaper articles. As soon as she was purchased, my nightmares stopped and my apartment was quiet. But the most disturbing image that Annette left behind was the picture I had taken of her when I put her up for auction. At first, the image seemed normal, and it remained as such until she had been shipped away. I went to delete the now unnecessary photo from my laptop when I saw in the thumbnail that the doll's face was different. Her eyes were black hollows, and she had painted ruby red lips that were twisted slightly upward in a sinister grin. I clicked on the thumbnail to enlarge the image, but when I did, the face returned to its blank expression of nothingness. I deleted the image from my computer, but I couldn't get her eyes or her smile out of my mind. The Curse of Elmridge Pass. In the more rural part of San Diego County, there is a place known as Elmridge Pass. Elmridge Pass is a large and mostly deserted area with only one road. Stories and reports of unusual sightings in this area date back almost 100 years. Strange reports began when cattle belonging to local ranchers were often found dead and mutilated. Other perfectly healthy livestock also died frequently, with no apparent cause of death. Some animals, including family pets, were found butchered in the aftermath of what appeared to be bizarre rituals conducted in the area. It's never been discovered who or what was responsible for these disturbing acts. The locals in the area became truly concerned when 2 children disappeared from a local rancher's home. The parents awoke to find the children missing from their rooms, and the rancher later found their tracks leading away from the home. The tracks led into the surrounding wilderness and simply disappeared without a trace. Search parties were organized, but the children were never found. Another strange case involved the Elmridge Pass Bakery. The Elmridge Pass Bakery was one of the first businesses founded in the area. The owner of the bakery moved to Elmridge Pass with his wife and 2 children, and he opened his bakery soon after. He was successful, kind, and a respected member of the community, until one day he was found at home after having murdered his wife and children. The man was found on his knees, crying over their bodies. He was still dressed in his kitchen whites, which were covered in blood. He told investigators he had no memory of what had happened, and simply woke up to find himself hovering over the bodies of his family. There are many unverified stories of rapes and murders in the area as well. There are many who think the area is haunted by restless ghosts and demons. The truth is, there are some places in this world that are ancient and inherently evil. Elmridge Pass is one of these places. Today, Elmridge Pass is home to a small community and has one road running through it known as Elmridge Pass Road. Elmridge Pass Road is an old road that can take you between the cities of Chula Vista and Jamul near San Diego, California. Over the years, many people have reported strange occurrences after driving on the road. There isn't much to see if you decide to drive there during daylight. You might notice a few ranch houses and abandoned buildings scattered along the side of the road, but not much else. If you're feeling brave, however, you can take a drive along Elmridge Pass Road after dark. It doesn't matter if you start on the road heading east or west. The important thing to remember is, under no circumstances are you to stop along the road. In fact, before heading out, make sure your car has no mechanical issues and a full tank of gas. Beware, there have been reports of perfectly operational cars breaking down, although this is rare. You will most likely encounter things that will make you reluctant to continue driving, but once you decide to drive the road after dark, there's no changing your mind. Yes, it's entirely possible you won't encounter anything unusual on your drive. Many people have driven the road and reported nothing beyond a strange and uneasy feeling throughout the trip. However, if you do see anything unusual, don't stop your car. You may see things that cause you to feel concerned, confused, or even something that will terrify you. Just remember to stay in your vehicle and continue straight ahead. The road begins as a typical paved street. Before long, you'll come across a sign indicating the end of the pavement, and the rest of your trip will be along a dirt road. Once you've gone that far, keep your eyes open and don't let anything distract you. Your phone will most likely lose signal once you reach this point. If you do have signal, you'll notice the battery life on your phone will decline rapidly. The first strange thing you might see is a lady in the blue dress. Sightings of the lady in the blue dress are the most commonly reported paranormal activity on Elmridge Pass Road. You might see her standing along the side of the road, attempting to flag you down. You might also see her curled in a fetal position alongside the road. Whatever the case, ignore her and keep driving. The history behind the lady in the blue dress is unknown, but everyone who has encountered her has described a horrible feeling of dread. Many say she's no lady at all, but some kind of demon trying to convince you to stop. No one knows for sure, but under no circumstance are you to stop for her. If you decide to drive with your windows down, which I don't recommend, it's possible you will hear a piercing scream echo through the hills. Some individuals have reported their vehicle completely breaking down upon hearing the scream, and they were not able to start again until the screams subsided, which can often take several minutes. If this happens, keep calm until you can start your vehicle, then exit the area as quickly as possible. Do not get out of your vehicle. If you drive along Elmridge Pass Road during a full moon, you might see strange creatures in the countryside. Some have reported sightings of a large beast they describe as similar in appearance to an ape. Others have seen large coyotes walking upright on their hind legs. Further reports indicate sightings of a large, furry, bovine creature with bells attached to it wandering the road. The Bonita Museum near Elmridge Pass claims to have a cast footprint of this creature. You may also discover small handprints appear along your windows. Ignore this and continue to drive. I recommend you don't go alone if you decide to drive the road at night. There truly is safety in numbers. However, sometimes passengers will report strange occurrences happening with one another. One woman accompanied her sister and her sister's boyfriend during the drive. The woman stated she fell asleep in the back seat, and when her sister looked back to check on her, she was horrified to see a horned, shadowy figure with red eyes hovering over her. She stated she knew without a doubt it was the devil. Others have reported strange behavior displayed by their passengers. Even the calmest, most passive individuals have been known to act paranoid, aggressive, violent, or hysterical. Whatever the case, do not allow your passengers to distract you until you reach the other side of the road. The rarest and most terrifying thing you might encounter is what is known as the demon car of Elmridge Pass Road. No one knows where it came from or why it inhabits the area. You might see headlights appear behind you, possibly as far as 1 mile away. Before long, you'll find the headlights are right behind your vehicle, regardless of how fast you're driving. If you drive off-road, they will follow. You will have a very hard time outrunning it. The headlights will back off every so often, before suddenly moving forward to within an inch of your rear bumper. The headlights will move violently back and forth, and you will hear a horn honking at you repeatedly. Do not stop your car. Do not attempt to turn around. Keep driving until you reach pavement. Once you do, you'll see the headlight stop and turn around to drive back in the other direction. It will disappear into the night faster than you thought possible, and the headlights will no longer be visible. It's possible you'll encounter other strange things along the road that I didn't mention. Whatever the case, continue driving until you're on the other end of the road. Once you've reached pavement again, things should be back to normal. Throughout the years, there have been many stories of tragedy and terror stemming from Elmridge Pass. Perhaps all the stories are just old legends started by ranchers to keep people out of the area. Maybe none of the stories are true. Still, there's something inherently terrifying about Elmridge Pass Road. Something that awakens an instinctual, prehistoric terror buried inside all of us. Maybe it's best to be cautious while driving there at night, at least until you've reached the end of the road. The night visitors. My internet service provider used to have offices in a shopping center before they moved to their comparatively lush accommodations elsewhere. There was a drop box at that original location. The monthly bill was due, and thus, there but for the grace of the net, I went. It was about 9:30 p.m. when I left. From my relatively isolated apartments, it's about 10 to 15 minutes or so to downtown. Abilene has a population of about 110,000. Right next to Camelot Communications' old location is a $1.50 movie theater. At the time, the place was featuring that masterwork of modern film, Mortal Kombat. I drove by the theater on the way into the center proper and pulled into an empty parking space. Using the glow of the marquee to write out my check, I was startled to hear a knock on the driver's side window of my car. I looked over and saw two children staring at me from street. I need to describe them with the one feature, you can guess what it was, that I didn't realize until about halfway through the conversation, cleverly omitted. Both appear to be in that semi-mystical stage of life children get into where you can't exactly tell their age. Both were boys, and my initial impression is that they were somewhere between 10 to 14. Boy number 1 was the spokesman. Boy number 2 didn't speak during the entire conversation, at least not in words. Boy number 1 was slightly taller than his companion, wearing a pullover, hooded shirt with a sort of gray check pattern and jeans. I couldn't see his shoes. His skin was olive-colored and had curly, medium-length brown hair. He exuded an air of quiet confidence. Boy number 2 had pale skin with a trace of freckles. His primary characteristic seemed to be looking around nervously. He was dressed in a similar manner to his companion, but his pullover was a light green color. His hair was a sort of pale orange. They didn't appear to be related, at least directly. Oh great, I thought. They're going to hit me up for money. And then the air changed. I've explained this before, but for the benefit of any new lurkers out there, right before I experience something strange, there's a change in perception that comes about which I describe in the above manner. It's basically enough time to know it's too late. So, there I was, filling out a check in my car, which was still running, and in a sudden panic over the appearance of two little boys. I was confused, but an overwhelming sense of fear and unearthliness rushed in nonetheless. The spokesman smiled, and the sight, for some inexplicable reason, chilled my blood. I could feel fight or flight responses kicking in. Something I knew instinctually was not right, but I didn't know what it could possibly be. I rolled down the window very, very slightly and asked yes. The spokesman smiled again, broader this time. His teeth were very, very white. "Hey, mister, what's up?" "We have a problem," he said. His voice was that of a young man, but his diction, quiet calm, and something I still couldn't put my finger on made my desire to flee even greater. "You see, my friend and I want to see the films, but we forgot our money," he continued. "We need to go to our house to get it. Want to help us out?" "Okay." Journalists are required to talk to lots of people, and that includes children. I've seen and spoken to lots of them. Here's how that usually goes. Mister, can I see that camera? I won't break it or anything. I promise. My dad has a camera, and he lets me hold it sometimes, I guess, and I took a picture of my dog. It wasn't very good because I got my finger in the way, and add in some feet shuffling or body swaying, and you got a typical kid talking to a stranger. In short, they're usually apologetic. People generally teach children that when they talk to adults, they're usually bothering them for one reason or another, and they should at least be polite. This kid was in no way fitting the mold. His command of language was incredible, and he showed no signs of fear. He spoke as if my help was a foregone conclusion. When he grinned, it was as if he was trying to say, "I know something, and you're not going to like it. But the only way you're going to find out what it is will be to do what I say." Was the best reply I could offer. Now here's where it starts to get strange. The quiet companion looked at the spokesman with a mixture of confusion and guilt on his face. He seemed in some ways shocked, not with his friend's brusque manner, but that I didn't just immediately open the door. He had me nervously. The spokesman seemed a bit perturbed, too. I still was registering something wrong with both. "Come on, mister," the spokesman said again, smooth as silk. Car salesman could learn something from this kid. "Now, we just want to go to our house. And we're just two little boys." That really scared me. Something in the tone and diction again sent off alarm bells. My mind was frantically trying to process what it was perceiving about the two figures that was wrong. Was all I could manage. I felt myself digging my fingernails into the steering wheel. "What movie were you going to see?" I asked finally. "Mortal Kombat, of course," the spokesman said. The silent one nodded in affirmation, standing a few paces behind. "Oh," I said. I stole a quick glance at the marquee and at the clock in my car. Mortal Kombat had been playing for an hour, the last showing of the evening. The silent one looked increasingly nervous. I think he saw my glances and suspected that I might be detecting something was not above board. "Come on, mister. Listen, we can't get in your car until you do, you know," the spokesman said soothingly. "Just let us in, and we'll be gone before you know it. We'll go to our mother's house." We locked eyes. To my horror, I realized my hand had strayed toward the door lock, which was engaged, and was in the process of opening it. I pulled it away, probably a bit too violently, but it did force me to look away from the children. I turned back. "Air. I offered weakly, and then my mind snapped into sharp focus. For the first time, I noticed their eyes. They were coal black. No pupil, no iris. Just two staring orbs reflecting the red and white light of the marquee. At that point, I know my expression betrayed me. The silent one had a look of horror on his face in a combination that seemed to indicate, A, the impossible had just happened, and B, we've been found out. The spokesman, on the other hand, wore a mask of anger. His eyes glittered brightly in the half-light. "Come on, mister," he said. "We won't hurt you. You have to let us in. We don't have a gun." That last statement scared the living hell out of me, because at that point by his tone, he was plainly saying, "We don't need a gun." He noticed my hand shooting down toward the gear shift. The spokesman's final words contained an anger that was complete and whole, and yet contained in some respects a tone of panic. "We can't come in unless you tell us it's okay. Let us in." I ripped the car into reverse. Thank goodness no one was coming up behind me, and tore out of the parking lot. I noticed the boys in my peripheral vision, and I stole a quick glance back. They were gone. The sidewalk by the theater was deserted. I drove home in a heightened state of panic. Had anyone attempted to stop me, I would have run on through and faced the consequences later. I bolted into my house, scanning all around, including the sky. What did I see? Maybe nothing more than some kids looking for a ride, and some really funky contacts. Yeah, right?
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.